What would you do if your 90-year-old grandmother walked into court shaking, holding a $59,000 fine for something so absurd it sounds impossible? But when Judge Caprio asks her one simple question, the truth she reveals brings the entire courtroom to tears and changes everything. This is the story of Margaret Chen, a 90-year-old widow who's about to lose everything she owns because her millionaire neighbor decided she's a nuisance. And guys, I need to warn you right now, this case will wreck you emotionally. Because what Margaret has been hiding for 40 years isn't just heartbreaking, it's the most beautiful act of love you'll ever witness. And when Judge Frank Caprio discovers the truth, he does something so unprecedented that it goes viral with over 60 million views worldwide. Before I show you what happens when compassion meets cruelty in Judge Caprio's courtroom, less than 4% of you watching are actually subscribed. If you believe in protecting the vulnerable, if you believe that wealth shouldn't crush kindness, smash that subscribe button right now. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from: New York, London, Mumbai, São Paulo, because this story deserves to reach every corner of the planet. It's a freezing Tuesday morning in Providence Municipal Court, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you grateful for warm shelter. Judge Frank Caprio is reviewing his case files when the bailiff approaches with an unusual expression on his face. "Your Honor," the bailiff says quietly, "the next case is going to upset you. A 90-year-old woman, $59,000 in accumulated fines for feeding stray cats. The complainant is Richard Hastings, the real estate developer." Judge Caprio looks up sharply. He knows that name. Richard Hastings, the millionaire who's been buying up entire neighborhoods in Providence, displacing longtime residents to build luxury condominiums. A man who measures success in property values and views compassion as weakness. $59,000? Judge Caprio repeats. For feeding cats? 117 separate violations over 2 years, Your Honor. $500 per violation. The city animal control has been issuing citations every week, but she kept feeding them anyway. Judge Caprio shakes his head slowly, already sensing that there's more to this story than what's written in the case file. And he's about to discover just how right he is. At exactly 10:30 a.m., the courtroom doors open and Margaret Chen enters. And guys, if you're not emotionally prepared for what you're about to witness, I suggest you grab some tissues right now, because this 90-year-old woman's entrance alone will break your heart. Margaret is tiny, barely 5 feet tall, her body bent with age and arthritis. She's wearing a faded floral dress that's been carefully mended in several places, a cardigan that's seen better decades, and sensible shoes that are worn but spotlessly clean. Her silver hair is pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her obvious poverty, she carries herself with quiet dignity. But what catches everyone's attention is how badly she's shaking. Her weathered hands tremble as she grips her walker, and in those hands she clutches a manila envelope so tightly that her knuckles have gone white. Whatever's in that envelope, it means everything to her. Behind Margaret, looking completely out of place, is Richard Hastings and his attorney. Hastings is wearing a suit that probably costs more than Margaret's monthly income for an entire year. He's checking his phone, clearly annoyed that he has to be here at all. His body language screams impatience and contempt. The contrast couldn't be more stark. A 90-year-old widow struggling to reach the podium, and a millionaire real estate mogul who looks like he's about to attend a board meeting. This is David versus Goliath, except David is elderly, barely able to stand, and facing financial annihilation. Judge Caprio watches Margaret's slow, painful progress to the front of the courtroom. He watches her struggle with each step, watches her pause twice to catch her breath, watches the way she keeps that envelope pressed against her chest like it's her most precious possession. "Mrs. Chen," Judge Caprio says gently, his voice carrying the warmth that's made him beloved by millions. "Please, take your time. There's no rush here." Margaret finally reaches the podium and looks up at Judge Caprio with eyes that have seen 9 decades of life, eyes that have witnessed joy and heartbreak, love and loss, hope and despair. And in those eyes, Judge Caprio sees something that stops him cold, not fear of the court or the fine, but a deep, profound sadness mixed with determination. "Your Honor," Margaret's voice is soft but clear, carrying the slight accent of someone who came to America seeking a better life. I'm ready. Judge Caprio opens the case file, and his expression darkens as he reads the details. Mrs. Chen, it says here that you've been cited 117 times over the past 2 years for violating City Ordinance 1432, which prohibits feeding stray or feral animals on public property. The total amount of these fines is $59,000. Is this correct? Yes, Your Honor. And it says that despite receiving these citations every single week, you continued to feed stray cats in your neighborhood. Is that also correct? Yes, Your Honor. Before Judge Caprio can continue, Richard Hastings' attorney stands up, a sharp-dressed man named Marcus Wellington, who specializes in representing wealthy clients in disputes with problematic neighbors. Your Honor, if I may, Wellington says smoothly. My client, Mr. Hastings, is a concerned resident and property owner in Mrs. Chen's neighborhood. The situation has become untenable. Mrs. Chen feeds upwards of 30 stray cats daily, creating a public health hazard and dramatically reducing property values. My client's home has decreased in value by an estimated $200,000 due to this ongoing nuisance. We're here today to ensure these fines are enforced and to request an injunction preventing Mrs. Chen from continuing this behavior. Judge Caprio's eyes narrow slightly. Mr. Wellington, I'll hear from your client in a moment. Right now, I'm speaking with Mrs. Chen. He turns back to Margaret. Mrs. Chen, I need to understand something. You're 90 years old. According to these documents, you live on a fixed income of $847 per month from Social Security. You own your home, but it's mortgaged. This $59,000 fine represents, well, it would take you nearly 6 years of your entire income to pay this, even if you didn't spend a single dollar on food, medicine, or anything else. Did you understand the consequences of continuing to feed these cats? Margaret nods slowly. Yes, Your Honor, I understood. Then why did you keep doing it? Why risk losing everything? And this is the moment where everything changes. Margaret's trembling hands lift the manila envelope she's been clutching. She holds it out toward Judge Caprio, and when she speaks, her voice cracks with emotion held back for 40 years. Your Honor, may I show you something? It will explain everything. Judge Caprio nods to the bailiff, who carefully takes the envelope from Margaret's shaking hands and brings it to the bench. The judge opens it slowly, and what he finds inside causes his professional composure to falter completely. Inside the envelope are photographs, dozens of them old and faded, protected carefully in plastic sleeves. But these aren't pictures of cats. These are photographs of children, 12 children to be exact. And in every photo, sitting among those children with a radiant smile, is a younger Margaret Chen. But before I tell you what Judge Caprio discovers about these 12 children, I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now if you believe that some stories need to be heard. Because what you're about to learn about Margaret Chen will change how you see kindness, sacrifice, and what it truly means to keep a promise. Judge Caprio lifts one photograph after another, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion, to dawning understanding, to complete emotional devastation. He sees Margaret at perhaps 50 years old, surrounded by children of various ages, some Asian, some Hispanic, some black, some white. They're at a park, they're at a dinner table, they're opening Christmas presents, and in every single photo, these children look at Margaret with pure love. Mrs. Chen, Judge Caprio's voice is thick with emotion. Who are these children? Margaret takes a shaky breath, and when she speaks, tears begin streaming down her weathered cheeks. Your Honor, those are my babies, all 12 of them. I was a foster mother for 35 years. These were the children nobody else wanted, the ones with disabilities, the ones who'd been abused, the ones the system had given up on. I took them in. I loved them. I gave them a home. The courtroom has gone absolutely silent. Richard Hastings has actually looked up from his phone. His attorney has stopped shuffling papers. Even the court reporter's hands have paused above her keyboard. Judge Caprio carefully sets down the photographs. Mrs. Chen, what does this have to do with the cats? And here it comes, the secret that's about to break everyone's heart. Margaret's voice shakes as 4 decades of grief and love pour out. Your Honor, my daughter Sarah, my biological daughter, my only child, she died 40 years ago. Cancer. She was only 12 years old. The courtroom collectively holds its breath. Before Sarah died, we used to feed the stray cats in our neighborhood together. It was our special time, just the two of us, every evening at 6 o'clock. She would name each cat, talk to them, tell me stories about their imaginary lives. She made me promise. In the hospital, in her last days, she made me promise that I would keep feeding them, that I would take care of them the way she couldn't anymore. Margaret's hands gripped the podium to steady herself. I've kept that promise for 40 years, Your Honor. Every single day at 6 o'clock, I feed 12 cats. Always 12, because Sarah was 12. I don't feed 30 cats like Mr. Hastings claims. I feed exactly 12. The same 12 every evening, because these cats are my connection to my daughter. They're the last promise I made to her. They're all I have left of my baby girl. Judge Caprio removes his glasses and wipes his eyes. Grown men in the gallery are crying. Women are sobbing quietly into their hands. Even the bailiff, a tough ex-military man who's seen everything, turns away to compose himself. But Margaret isn't finished. Your Honor, after Sarah died, I couldn't have more children of my own. The grief was too much. So I became a foster mother. For 35 years, I took in 127 children that nobody else wanted. I used every penny I had to give them a home, to give them love, to give them what Sarah never got, a chance to grow up. She gestures to the photographs still spread across Judge Caprio's bench. Those 12 children in the pictures, they're the ones who stayed longest. They're the ones I think of as my own. And Your Honor, every single one of them grew up to do something beautiful with their lives. One is a doctor, 2 are teachers, 1 is a Marine who served 3 tours, 1 opened a shelter for homeless youth. They all succeeded because someone believed in them when everyone else gave up. Margaret's voice drops to a whisper. I stopped fostering 6 years ago. I'm too old now, too tired, but I still feed those 12 cats every evening at 6 o'clock because it's the only way I can still feel close to Sarah. It's the only way I can keep my promise to my daughter. The silence in the courtroom is deafening. Judge Caprio stands up, that signature move that signals something profound is about to happen. He walks around the bench and approaches Margaret directly, and what he does next will be remembered in Providence legal history forever. He takes both of her trembling hands in his, looks her directly in the eyes, and says with absolute conviction, Mrs. Chen, you are one of the most remarkable human beings I have ever had the privilege to meet. But Richard Hastings, the millionaire developer who's been sitting through all of this, suddenly stands up, his face red with frustration. And what he says next proves that some people are so consumed by greed that even the most heartbreaking story can't penetrate their hearts. Your Honor, Hastings interrupts, his voice sharp with irritation. This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the law. I paid $2.3 million for my property. I have a right to live in a neighborhood that isn't overrun with animals. Her sad story doesn't give her the right to destroy my property value. The courtroom erupts in angry mutters. Someone shouts, "Are you kidding me?" A woman in the gallery stands up and yells, "She lost her daughter." Judge Caprio slowly turns to face Richard Hastings, and the temperature in the room drops 20 degrees. When Judge Caprio speaks, his voice carries the weight of absolute moral authority. Mr. Hastings, please approach the bench. Hastings walks forward with his attorney, clearly confident that the law is on his side. After all, Margaret did violate city ordinances. The fines are legitimate. He thinks he's about to win. He has no idea what's coming. Judge Caprio looks at Richard Hastings the way a disappointed father looks at a son who's failed to understand the most basic lessons of human decency. Mr. Hastings, before I rule on this case, I want to ask you a question. When you bought your $2.3 million home, did you do any research about the neighborhood? Hastings looks confused. Of course, I had a full property inspection, title search, the works. Did you know that Mrs. Chen has lived on that street for 56 years? That she's owned her home since 1967? That she raised 127 foster children in that house, children who are now doctors, teachers, nurses, and productive members of society? Your Honor, that's irrelevant. I'm not finished, Mr. Hastings. Judge Caprio's voice cuts through the attorney's interruption like a knife. Did you know that Mrs. Chen's property is paid off? That she owns it free and clear? That she's been part of that community for longer than you've been alive? Hastings shifts uncomfortably. I knew she'd been there a long time, but you moved into her neighborhood, Mr. Hastings. She didn't move into yours. You bought a house on a street where a 90-year-old widow has been feeding 12 cats every evening for 4 decades. You knew this was happening when you bought the property, didn't you? The attorney tries to intervene. Your Honor, my client shouldn't be expected to. Judge Caprio holds up his hand. Counselor, I asked Mr. Hastings a direct question. Did you know Mrs. Chen was feeding cats when you bought your property? There's a long pause. Finally, Hastings admits, yes, the previous owner mentioned it, but I assumed once I moved in, I could put a stop to it. You assumed you could force a 90-year-old widow to break a deathbed promise to her 12-year-old daughter who died of cancer. Is that correct, Mr. Hastings? The courtroom is electrified. Every eye is on Richard Hastings, who suddenly looks far less confident. I didn't know about her daughter. But that doesn't change the fact that what, Mr. Hastings? Judge Caprio's voice rises with controlled fury. That you've spent 2 years harassing a 90-year-old woman? That you've used the legal system to try to crush someone who has spent her entire life serving others while you've spent yours accumulating wealth? That Judge Caprio walks back to his bench and picks up the case file, flipping through pages with deliberate intensity. I've done some research of my own, Mr. Hastings. Your development company has been cited 47 times for code violations in the past 5 years. You've displaced over 200 longtime residents from their homes through aggressive buyout tactics. 3 of your construction projects have been investigated for safety violations, and yet you stand in my courtroom claiming that 12 cats that are fed once a day by a woman honoring her dying daughter, are somehow the problem? Wellington, the attorney, tries desperately to regain control. Your Honor, we're sympathetic to Mrs. Chen's situation, but the law is clear. City Ordinance 14-32 prohibits. I know what the ordinance says, Counselor, but let me tell you what else the law says. Judge Caprio opens another folder. Rhode Island State Law, Section 34-18-48, provides protection for long-term residents against nuisance claims when the complained of behavior predates the complainant's residence by more than 5 years. Mrs. Chen has been feeding these cats for 40 years. Your client has lived there for 2. Legally, he has no standing. Wellington's face goes pale. Your Honor, we weren't aware of that statute. Then perhaps you should do better research before you try to destroy a 90-year-old widow's life. Judge Caprio turns back to Margaret, and his expression transforms from stern authority to gentle compassion. Mrs. Chen, I'm dismissing every single citation against you, all 117 of them. The total amount you owe is $0. The courtroom explodes in applause, but Judge Caprio raises his hand for quiet. He's not finished. Furthermore, I'm issuing a permanent injunction against Mr. Hastings and any future residents of that neighborhood from filing complaints about your cat feeding. You have the legal right to continue your evening ritual for as long as you choose. Margaret's legs buckle slightly, and the bailiff rushes forward to steady her. Tears are streaming down her face, but for the first time since entering the courtroom, they're tears of relief rather than fear. But Judge Caprio still isn't done. What he says next will make this case go viral worldwide. Mrs. Chen, I'm also going to do something I've never done in 38 years on this bench. I'm personally contributing $5,000 to help you with any outstanding bills or expenses you may have. And I'm going to make sure that every news station in Providence tells your story. Not the story of a woman feeding cats, but the story of a mother who kept a promise to her dying daughter for 40 years and who gave 127 children a chance at life. The courtroom erupts again, but this time, Judge Caprio lets the applause continue. People are standing, cheering, crying. Margaret is sobbing into her hands, overwhelmed by decades of carrying this burden alone, suddenly lifted. Judge Caprio approaches Richard Hastings one final time. Mr. Hastings, you came here today thinking you'd use the law to crush someone weaker than you. Instead, you've revealed your own character. I suggest you spend some time reflecting on what truly matters in life, because I promise you, When you're 90 years old and looking back on your life, you won't be thinking about property values. You'll be thinking about the people you loved and the promises you kept. He pauses. Or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be thinking about all the people you stepped on to build your empire. But I hope for your sake that's not the case. Hastings and his attorney leave the courtroom in silence, their heads down. But the story doesn't end here, because what happened after this case became public created a movement that changed Providence forever. Within 24 hours, Margaret Chen's story was everywhere. Local news, national news, international outlets, everyone wanted to tell the story of the 90-year-old grandmother who kept a promise to her dying daughter for 4 decades. But the most incredible response came from the 12 foster children in those photographs. Now adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, they all traveled to Providence within a week to support the woman who had saved their lives. Dr. James Morrison, now a pediatric oncologist, told reporters, "Margaret Chen took me in when I was 8 years old. I'd been in 7 foster homes. I had severe ADHD and behavioral problems. Nobody wanted me. She loved me anyway. She believed in me anyway. And now I spend my life trying to save children like Sarah Chen, children fighting cancer. Everything I am, I owe to her." Maria Rodriguez, now a high school principal, said through tears, "I was headed toward gangs and prison when Margaret took me in at age 13. She saw something in me that nobody else saw. She fought for me when everyone else gave up. That woman is the only mother I've ever known." One by one, all 12 of Margaret's longest-term foster children shared similar stories. Stories of a woman who had nothing but gave everything, who asked for nothing but deserved recognition, who kept promises even when it cost her everything. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. A GoFundMe campaign raised over $340,000 in 3 days. The money ensured that Margaret would never have to worry about finances again. Local veterinarians began providing free care for her 12 cats. A pet food company started delivering premium cat food to her door every week at no charge. But perhaps the most touching moment came when the city of Providence held a special ceremony honoring Margaret Chen. The mayor declared November 15th Margaret Chen Day in recognition of her 35 years of foster care service. And they unveiled something that made everyone cry: a small bronze plaque installed at the park where Sarah and Margaret used to feed cats together, reading, "Sarah Chen Memorial Garden, in memory of Sarah Chen, 1968 to 1980, and in honor of her mother Margaret, who kept her promise. Here, love never dies." Judge Frank Caprio attended that ceremony, and when he spoke, he said something that perfectly captured why this case resonated with millions of people worldwide. Margaret Chen reminds us that keeping a promise, especially to someone we love, is one of the most sacred acts a human being can perform. In a world that often values wealth over character, property over people, and convenience over commitment, Margaret chose love. Every single day for 40 years, regardless of the cost, she chose love. That's not just admirable. That's heroic. As for Richard Hastings, the aftermath was swift and severe. His development company faced public boycotts. 3 major investors pulled out of his projects. And most significantly, he quietly sold his house and moved out of the neighborhood within 2 months. His attempt to crush a 90-year-old widow had instead crushed his own reputation. 6 months after the trial, Margaret Chen still lives in her home on Elmwood Avenue. Every evening at 6 o'clock, she walks slowly to her back porch, sometimes with the help of one of her former foster children who now take turns visiting her, and she feeds 12 cats. But now she's not alone. Neighbors join her. Children from the street come to hear stories about Sarah. And on special occasions, all 12 of her longest-term foster children return to sit with her, to thank her, and to remind her that the love she gave to a dying daughter and to 127 unwanted children has created ripples of goodness that will echo for generations. If this story moved you, if Margaret Chen's 40-year promise touched your heart, share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that love is stronger than law, that promises matter, and that one person's compassion can change the world. Like this video if you believe Judge Caprio represents the very best of what our justice system can be, not just enforcement of rules, but recognition of human dignity. Subscribe for more stories that prove kindness is never wasted, compassion is never weakness, and keeping a promise to someone you love is the most powerful thing a human being can do. And remember Judge Caprio's words, "In this courtroom, character counts more than capital. Always has, always will." Comment below and tell us about a promise you've kept or someone in your life who showed you the meaning of true commitment. Because Margaret Chen's story is everyone's story, a reminder that the love we give and the promises we keep define who we are far more than anything we own. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for keeping stories like Margaret's alive in your hearts.